Well, I asked, where's the beef? Let's call this for what this is. Oh my God! They are so hopelessly woke. How dare you? That is the intellectual capital of the left today. Give me a break. You are now watching the Daily Roundup. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Daily Roundup on this, a Thursday, January 26, 2023. I'm David Menzies, and my co-host, well, let me tell you a little bit about my co-host, folks. Do you know that today is National Spouses Day? I would love to know what she did on National Spouses Day, but she doesn't kiss and tell. She is the she-devil with a sword. She is the Khaleesi of Northern Alberta. She is Sheila Gunn Reid. How you doing there, Sheila Gunn Reid, on National Spouses Day?
My spouse is the way it works, so I'm just doing what I do around here. But you know who's the real hero of National Spouses Day? Lady Menzoid.
Oh, you know what?
Because how does she do it? How?
I said to her this morning.
Oh, no. Did you give her a stupid card where you circled the back to prove that you paid extra for it?
I said to her, what are you going to give me on National Spouses Day? And because this is a family-friendly show, let's put it this way. The phrase ended with the word off, and I can't say the word that came in front of it. But she was in no mood for shenanigans, as we say, no mood for nonsense. So, that is how National Spouses Day was celebrated. But really, Sheila, isn't this redundant? I mean, if you have a spouse, you have a honeymoon, you have your own little special day where you tied the knot. How is this not a replication of one's honeymoon?
Valentine's Day is like 3 weeks from now, by the way. Like, this is just Hallmark created garbage, where you just have to, like, I don't know if this makes offices more exciting, where you have like the day on the board and all the poor people who have to work like in an office drone capacity. This is like something that breaks up the monotony for them. I don't know. Is it just another reason to sell an overpriced card, as you would point out? Maybe. I'm not sure. But it's also Australia Day. And the reason I know that is because our Australian team has the day off, because we respect their customs and culture and traditions over there. And it just reminds me that one of the dumbest things I ever read was in the Sydney Morning Herald the other day. So I think we might have snatched up all the smart people in Australia and have them working for us here at Rebel News, because this is in the Sydney Morning Herald. So I think this is like their newspaper of note down there.
Yep.
I think the story is called, and I'm teasing, Avi's got a like almost like a cult-like following in Australia, which means that there are a lot of smart people in Australia. Your media is not catering to you. That's what I think. And really, that's what I learned from this article. Sorry, I'm just sort of springing it on Olivia. But this is the headline, if you want to find it. It's called, "I'm a single mother. Want to give me a hand with the groceries." That's what it's titled. And the reason it's literally the dumbest thing I've ever read is because this is one of these, it's like end stage feminism here. So and I don't know why I'm bringing it up. I'm just so prickled by it. This woman pens an essay saying, so I would assume this woman is against chivalry. But she says, "As I haul multiple shopping bags from my boot," I think that's what they call a trunk, "while my toddler skitters between parked cars, my neighbor nods hello from his back porch while ashing his cigarette. Each week, despite knowing that this is the part that gets me. He's just giving you what you wanted, sister. You want modern feminism? It's all yours." Each week, despite knowing that I'm a solo single mother by choice with a donor-conceived son and no partner at home, my neighbor watches me teeter inside a leaning tower of motherhood with hefty bags and a yelling child attached to my shins. I smile brightly and say hello, but my mind is a static of expletives. Why doesn't he offer to effing help? Wow. You thought you could do it all, lady? So do it all. Have you considered marrying the father?
You know, aren't we men in the realm now, Sheila, of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Our good friend at True North, Andrew Lund, told me this way back when we were on Sun News Network, that he had opened a door for a lady who had her hands full, and instead of getting a thank you, he got a rebuke. He got some little quick drive-by lecture of, don't you think I can do this myself? And I said, Andrew, I thought this was the stuff of urban legend. You did a good deed for someone and they dumped on you. I mean, Sheila, is that offensive to you if a gentleman opens a door for you and allows you in first? Or do you subscribe to this kind of crazy feminist notion that, I don't know, you're demeaning my physical strength or something like that in terms of doing an act of chivalry, if I can call it chivalry anymore?
Yeah, I'm fine with people holding the door for me, man or woman. I think if you've got the door, hold it for the person behind you. That's the polite thing to do. But yeah, I really do feel bad for men because you have these like feminists who are saying, I'm going to be able to do this all by myself. I don't need a husband to do even the smallest husband things like grab the kid while I bring in the groceries. But now she's currently this woman being mugged by reality. I love the other part of the article. As you go down, she says, if this were a town square 100 years ago, my neighbor would no doubt get off his arse and help carry my bags or watch my child while I do the return trip to get the second load. But parenting and all of its attendant domestic minutia has become increasingly atomicized. Atomized, I guess is the right word. No, lady, if this were 100 years ago, you'd be married.
Yeah.
You'd be married. None of this would be a thing. If your husband died of some awful disease that doesn't kill people now, or he died in a war or whatever, everybody would understand.
Yep.
But you chose this. And not only did you choose this for yourself, you chose it for your child. And now you're lamenting that nobody is helping you live with the consequences of your choices. This is not even a woman who like she's dealing with maybe a one night stand or whatever. And she's living with the consequences and she's trying to do the right thing by a wrong thing, right? Like that's admirable, quite frankly. But that's not what she's doing here. She didn't leave an abusive husband. He didn't die. There's none of that. She literally paid money to choose this. She also says now this is the part that I love because she chose this thing that's hard. She wants to change the entire culture now. I'm part of a movement that is trying to reclaim a village model of parenting. Again, the best village for your child is probably a family with a mom and a dad. But no, instead of doing that, she wants to create a society-wide movement. Marry the dad next time.
Sheila, a couple of things. You're right. She's subscribing to this notion that it takes a village to raise a child.
No, it takes
really.
a mom and a dad. Mom and a dad, maybe a grandparent here or there. Yeah.
I know that's terribly uncool to say, but a mother and a father, I think that is more optimal than a village. And, it also reminds me, I don't know who was the first to coin this. It was, I once heard it said it was the 4 rules for life, that if you subscribe to them, you'll be, these days, ahead of at least 50% of the population. 1, stay in school. 2, don't commit crime. 3, don't do illicit drugs. And 4, don't bring a life into this world without the financial means to support him or her. I know what you're saying. Gee, that's common sense. Well, that's the point. Common sense isn't that common anymore. You subscribe to these 4 caveats. And like I said, Sheila, you are way ahead of the pack these days, sadly.
I love how she chooses a family where she thinks that there's no need for a man. And then now she wants to force all the village men to do the job the father should have done. Honest to goodness. Anyways, I should tell everybody what we're doing. Thanks for playing
Sheila,
along.
Before Olivia. You do, I know our top story. It's a funny one. Well, perversely amusing. But please don't give away what is now politically incorrect in some circles. We're going to run a little half-minute clip from an Abbott and Costello movie from almost 70 years ago. And I want our viewers to think, what term, what word is now politically incorrect in this clip. And this caught me completely by surprise because, I do a year-end video where I anticipate the following year's politically correct terms to be. For example, I know it's in a year now, great white shark. That's gone. The idea of putting greatness and whiteness together, no way. That cannot fly. But so we're going to run that clip after you give the ground rules, Sheila. And I ask our audience, try to guess what is now a term that is now verboten.
And this story was my selection, by the way. I was like, we have to talk about this. We absolutely have to. And just for our viewers at home, Abbott and Costello, they were on TV or movies, I guess it was.
Both.
When David Menzies was in high school. So
oh, they were well into repeats, you cheeky monkey, by then.
Okay. So anyway, this is a Rebel News daily live stream, which we have a new intro, which I thought was fun. It was like David Menzies' best catchphrases. We have to put "in any event" in there because me and Alex, the email guy, we just say that to each other. It's an inside joke. Anyway, so this is the Rebel News Daily where we talk about things completely unscripted and our poor producers have to play along with us, as do all of you at home. We are streaming on, Rumble, YouTube, Odyssey, Getter, and Twitter. But YouTube is a censorship platform. So we're there because there are a lot of you there and we don't want to abandon you. And frankly, I think YouTube would love for us to go away. So that's a great reason to stay. But if you want to support the work that we do completely out of the goodness of your heart, because you're cheering for your favorite rebels to live on when people like the CBC would love for us to die, and Justin Trudeau definitely would love to put us out of his misery, you can leave something called a Rumble rant on Rumble. That's their paid chat. Or on Odyssey, it's called a hyper chat. And David and I will do our best to get to all of those at the end of the show. And it's, as I said, it's a great way to support your favorite little news outlet that could, because we are fiercely independent. We'll never take a penny from Justin Trudeau. So that's it.
Indeed. And Sheila, without further ado, why don't we roll this clip? It's from a 1955 Abbott and Costello movie. No, I wasn't born yet. And like I said, folks, at the beginning, try to guess what term is now language verboten in some circles. I woke up to this news and I said, oh, come on, you got to be kidding me. I couldn't believe it. But anyways, let's roll this little half-minute clip and you try to guess what's now allegedly offside.
Find the mummy. Don't worry, the mummy will find you.
You'll howl as you follow Bud and Lou in a strange land where exotic dancers perform ancient rituals. You'll scream at this mystic world of mad magic and uproarious adventure.
Does this mean anything to you?
It means death to whoever holds it.
Okay, Sheila. I'm wondering if anyone caught on to what is now a politically incorrect term. Sock it to us, sister.
This is, again, I've been subject to a lot of dumb journalism or dumb news stories because I don't think the journalism is bad on this, but the idea behind it is terrible. So the term mummy is, quote, dehumanizing and should no longer be used, museum says, in a bid to protect ancient Egyptians. Let's keep going. London's British Museum and National Museums of Scotland no longer use the term, preferring mummified person or mummified remains, which actually seems worse than mummies, because when you say mummy, I realize that there's like a human being inside there, as a politically correct alternative. A National Museums Scotland spokesperson said, where we know the name of an individual, we use that. Otherwise, we use mummified man, woman, boy, girl, or person. I'm sorry. Boy and girl, we say children now. We don't make the gender distinction, you bigots.
Yeah, they didn't quite think this through. I mean, the people at Disney World are now recoiling, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Oh boy, we got to, send a memo to those people, Sheila. I'm sorry, continue.
Yes. The word mummy, this is where they admit that this is just social justice BS. The word mummy is not incorrect, they say, but it is dehumanizing, whereas the term mummified person encourages our visitors to think of the individual. They've been dead for 6,000 years, but okay.
Sheila, how is, but on that point, how is mummified person not offensive and mummy is? They're so close, right?
You want to get social justice-y? Give the remains back to Egypt. But they're human. If they're human beings, if we want to humanize them, then maybe you should give them back to Egypt and stick them back in their sarcophagus and put them in the Valley of the Kings again. Well, but they get to treat them like they are, an artifact, but they want me to treat them as a human being with my language. These people got to pick a lane here.
Sheila, careful what you wish for. Many moons ago, I did a story on, it was a fellow who was collecting both mummified people, as the term is, I dare not say mummy anymore, and shrunken heads. And evidently, once upon a time, museums would put shrunken heads on display, and I'm going back to the 90s now, that was considered politically incorrect because these shrunken heads were, once upon a time, they were people, and so it was almost like exploiting A, their death, and B, the process that made them a curiosity, i.e. shrinking a head down to a little head. And what I was told by this individual is that, many museums have these in their collection. They're just not displayed publicly anymore. So going by that mantra of political correctness, if these are indeed human remains, then I guess whatever you call it, it shouldn't be on display, right?
You think? I mean, it's funny that this story has just come up because I just finished a 2-part podcast by Jimmy Akin on his Mysterious World podcast about mummies and how this Egyptologist got his hands on a cadaver that was donated for science because he wanted to see how it was done. Because there's a recipe for this and time frames and stuff. And they had it all these ways for a reason. It had to do with humidity and how you preserve the body, and then how you can get it to a certain state of preservation. Then you have to cross the arms. And by the way, the hook is not for pulling the brains out. It's for emulsifying it and then draining it out because you just can't pull it out. Anyways, I learned a lot. But I think this is interesting because the name is actually the name mummy. They've been using this to describe mummified remains since 1650. And the name is thought to have originated from the Arabic word mamiya. Again, don't write me letters. I don't speak Arabic. I'm just trying. Which translates to bitumen. Well, that's interesting. Oh boy, that's interesting for me. That's also going to get canceled, by the way. And they call it a balming substance, but I call it freedom fuel. They're also saying that the word mummy has stigma attached to it because of all these movies about the curse of the mummy, and I guess the whole entire Mummy series where the mummies come back and they're mean and blah blah blah. So
but wait a minute, Sheila, that to me that's what makes mummies cool. The idea that there is a curse that they could potentially be reanimated, that puts the mummy up.
That's why they mummified them, by the way. Again, thank you, Jimmy Akin. I learned a lot. They mummified them because for ancient Egyptians, you needed the whole body to be intact to be reanimated wherever you ended up being reanimated. And that's why they built these big tombs, was so that you wouldn't get grave robbed because your body had to be intact. And that's why they put the organs in these little jars, is because you're going to need your organs, but they also realize your organs are going to break down if we leave them inside your corpse. So they put them in little jars and preserve them because you needed those in the next life. So that's the fun part of the Mummy movies, is Yeah, that's what they wanted. They literally kept them all wrapped up and bundled up and preserved because one day they would be reanimated and rule the world. And so when they do, everybody gets offended, I guess.
I suppose, and when we look at classic horror films, let's face it, The Mummy was kind of a B-lister. I mean, if you look at the big three, Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Wolfman. Can we say Wolfman anymore? Is it Wolf Person, Sheila?
We're wolf people kind.
But I mean, what's a mummy?
I think they're just called furries. I think we're just calling them furries now. I don't know.
But really, at the end of the day, what's a mummy rather than just a regular human being wrapped in bandages? So, the idea of changing the name, rebranding it, that's not doing the Mummy fan base any favor. Let me tell you, Sheila.
Did we ask any Egyptians before we decided to do this? Or is this just a bunch of people in the UK being offended on behalf of them?
You know what? We should reach out to Egyptians. Sheila, I have an uncle, actually, who is a doctor in Cairo. Maybe I should call him.
Cool.
He's a chiropractor.
Oh, dear.
Anyway, let's mummify this joke.
Yeah, no
this
kidding.
subject.
You
and move
speaking
on.
of sucking all the life out of something and drying it right out. You just did with that terrible joke. Let's move on to the next thing.
I actually told that joke to an Egyptian that I was on a flight with, and he didn't laugh. He didn't get it. Anyway,
I'm sure he got it. Just wasn't funny.
Breaking news. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith responds to defamatory CBC article on email allegations. Well, knocked me down with a feather. You mean the CBC got something factually incorrect to the point that it counts as defamation? Sheila, what is this saga all about?
So this is, if you want to see the full story, I guess you want to watch Ezra's video from yesterday. That we showed it in full at the end of the show. What happened, and you can see it actually on lockdownamnesty.com. You can see the video there in full and sign the petition there. So that's your landing place for all things to do with this story. But for about 2 weeks now, it's been floating around in the mainstream media, perpetrated by those fake news peddlers, the CBC, that Premier Danielle Smith has been putting, frankly illegal if she did, pressure on Crown prosecutors to drop charges for COVID lockdowns. Now, there are ways that she could do this, but basically when I say the pressure would be illegal, what CBC is saying she did is that the same way Justin Trudeau pressured Jody Wilson-Raybould to not pursue charges against his favorite corrupt construction firm in Quebec, SNC-Lavalin. They're saying that Danielle Smith did the same, but to pressure them to drop charges against lockdown scofflaws. Now, there are ways that she can sort of drop those charges. And one of the ways is that they're not in the public interest. That, and we're short 50 Crown prosecutors, and it seems like not the best means of expending, these resources we don't even have. And the things they did are not illegal now, right? So it's like when Justin Trudeau legalized marijuana, would the Crown continue to pursue marijuana charges against people? Is that in the public interest if they were in possession of something that's completely legal now? So anyway, CBC says that she's been, and they say there are emails is what they say, of the Premier between the Crown Prosecution Office leaning on them to drop the charges. Well, a completely independent part of the bureaucracy examined 1 million emails. Not a single one. Not a single one. So then CBC tries to dig itself out of this hole because they get the thing completely wrong. They start trying to dig around and say, okay, well, Ezra Levant, we have this letter from you to the Premier about dropping the lockdown charges. What say you? Like, they're trying to create this scandal, and it's like, are you guys shocked that Ezra's anti-lockdown? Are you like there's a billboard on the side of the highway calling for lockdown amnesty, where we not only are we doing it publicly, saying like, hey, you should drop these lockdown charges, they're not in the public interest, but Ezra quietly, and it's not illegal, he's just not showy about the nice things he does behind closed doors, frankly. And I say this, not him. I don't think he wanted people to know that he did this, because he's in Toronto. He's not in Alberta. None of us Albertans have lockdown charges. But it's the right thing to do for Danielle Smith to find a way for her government to step back from these lockdown prosecutions. So Ezra sends a letter that he has obviously had a lawyer look over, because it's all meticulously legally footnoted, which means Ezra spent some money now on this, because again, it's the right thing to do. There's nothing in it for him. He's doing this quietly. CBC gets this, they publish it and say, I think this is evidence that Danielle Smith is basically taking her marching orders from Ezra Levant. We don't know what she did with that letter, but we know for sure she didn't pass it along to the Crown prosecutors, because it would have been in an email, and they looked at a million of them, and there wasn't anything there. Now, yesterday, the Premier says, CBC, we went through a million emails. We went through a million emails. You can't find evidence that this letter that Ezra Levant wrote got passed on to anybody. Besides, it's not illegal to advocate and send a letter to the Premier saying, please do the right thing. But now the Premier's mad. She thought CBC would do the right thing and retract. Yeah, right. So anyways, CBC, she sends out a letter yesterday. She condemned the CBC for publishing a defamatory article based on rumors that her staff sent Crown prosecutors emails about the Coutts blockade. There's not, a million emails examined. Nothing. In a release, the Premier's office claimed the article contains baseless allegations, and an internal investigation by Alberta Justice proved false. It goes on to say that the Premier wants an apology, a formal apology issued from the CBC, not specifically to her, but she wants them to include the nonpartisan officials from the Alberta Public Service who were maligned. She said, I have complete faith that the Public Service conducted a thorough review. I want to thank them for their seriousness. Anyway, she goes on to say, like, you need to apologize to the Crown. You need to apologize to officials from Alberta Justice. They didn't do anything wrong. Nobody from my office did anything wrong. There's no evidence that they did anything wrong. And you published a story about emails you had never even seen. And now they're saying, oh, sources say they saw these emails, but that's not what it said at the very beginning. You said emails, and this would not make it past our editorial standards whatsoever.
100%, Sheila. So now the ball is in CBC's court, clearly. What do you speculate they're going to do? Are they going to do the right thing, which would be to publish a retraction and an apology? Or are they going to double down? And if they do you think Danielle Smith will say, okay, see you in court, tell it to the judge?
I'm not sure what is going to happen here. We seem to be in a little bit of a standoff, but the longer this goes on, the worse CBC looks. Yep. Because it was found that they got the story wrong. And instead of just saying, okay, we got it wrong, they kept digging and trying to find evidence, even though there was no evidence whatsoever. And then they tried to sort of say, well, see, you talked to Ezra Levant. So obviously something sinister is going on here. Like I said to Drea yesterday, the mindset of these people, right? They can't understand that somebody did something altruistically with nothing in it for them. And so CBC is like, no, there's obviously some sort of sinister plot going on behind here to, I don't know, allow people to live their lives. Who knows? But according to CBC, it was bad. And they were sort of backtracking to create the outcome for the story they had already written and gotten wrong. And I don't know, we're in a bit of a standoff. So I guess we'll see what happens, but I'd love to know who CBC's anonymous sources were. And how does an article get published about emails without anybody at CBC ever seeing the emails? at Rebel News, we just can't take people's word for it. This is a reason why I publish all my access to information documents for everybody to see, because I don't want you to take my word for it. Look for yourself. But CBC doesn't do that. And how many other stories are they writing like this that they are completely getting wrong on baseless emails that nobody has ever seen?
Well, Sheila, at best, it's very, very sloppy journalism. At worst, there is an ideological agenda behind these smear pieces. And what confounds me, to tell you the truth, my friend, is that CBC is playing with fire, given that Pierre Poilievre is on record. He's defunding the CBC. He's going to say, you know what, you can continue to broadcast, but it's sink or swim, raise your own money. The idea that they would act so unethically and immorally and perhaps even criminally if a defamation charge sticks in court, they're not doing themselves any favors, I would say, Sheila.
But really, what's the consequence here? So maybe they get hit with defamation or libel or whatever. Who's going to pay for their lawyers in court? Who's going to pay the settlement? You know, they don't have any real consequences to getting things wrong because they are a crown corporation, highly subsidized by Justin Trudeau. There's no real financial fallout when they do stuff like this. And there are people who don't know how to change the channel on their TV, so all they watch is the CBC. And there are other people who are so ideologically against anything right of Chairman Mao that it doesn't matter that CBC lied because the target of the lie is their enemy, so that's fine.
But Sheila, here's the issue. If they are found guilty of defamation and part of the penalty, and I've seen this done at other news agencies when you get it wrong, the person responsible for the story does an on-air apology so that those people who tune into the CBC and don't question what kind of narrative they're given, when they see one of their own reporters deliver a publicly televised apology, I think that would make the whole process worth it, even though it's our money in terms of the CBC's lawyers going to bat for them.
Yeah, I wish. This reminds me of when we made Elections Alberta pin an apology tweet to us to their account for like 14 days because they had gotten something wrong about us. So I don't know. But let this be a lesson to all the other news media outlets out there. I think Danielle Smith just signaled a big message to you. If you're going to lie about her, you better be prepared to dance.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sheila, before we get into some other breaking news stories, how about we take our first ad break? Check it out, folks. We'll be right back after this.
My mug? I know. It's pretty cool. So is this hoodie I got on, and you could have it on too if you check out our special website at rebelnewsstore.com. That's where you can see Freedom Focus hoodies that we have for you, beanies, cell phone cases, you name it, all while supporting our journalism where we fight to bring you the other side of the story, as opposed to, being forced by the Trudeau government to fund leftist media out of your taxes. The truth is, without you and your generosity, there is no Rebel News. So again, if you like the reports that we bring you and that we also fight for freedoms in Canada, please consider doing some shopping, picking up some swag at rebelnewsstore.com. We appreciate your support.
Well, you know what, Sheila, just to switch gears and go to a local issue, at least as far as Toronto is concerned, I see on the front page yet another terrible story about the TTC, a.k.a. the Toronto Transit Commission, Dread Rocket. We've had killings on subway platforms, assaults, thievery. We the other day, a couple of TTC employees were chased by a man holding syringes. God knows what was in there.
Jeez.
Oh, yeah. It's hard to keep up because every day there's something else happening. A TCC driver that was shot with a BB gun, swarmings of young people, and yet the de rigueur response is for John Tory to call a press conference and say that, well, statistically, this is still very safe, and our hearts go out to the victims. I'm sorry, that's not good. And why don't we address the real problems here, Sheila? Why don't we talk about Toronto being a sanctuary city? Why don't we talk about criminals who are found with illegal guns and have committed heinous offenses being given bail just like that, and they're back out on the street again? I can just imagine the morale of the Toronto Police Service right now in terms of this catch and release response. I grew up all my life almost in Toronto. It was known as Toronto the Good. There was Peter Ustinov's famous quote, "Toronto is New York is run by the Swiss." And now I don't recognize this city anymore, Sheila. These stories about the anarchy and violence and even murder going on in Toronto's transit system, this is what you used to read about in New York's transit system or Chicago or Philadelphia or Los Angeles. But now it's here, and I don't see any political will to do anything about this. Now, as we're talking, I believe there's going to be a press conference about some measures, that the city is going to enlist. So I just want our audience to know that we're not privy to that press conference right now. But after the show's over, I'm going to go through that. Sheila, if you were the sheriff, so to speak, what do you do in terms of putting the kibosh on this anarchy on the rails?
Well, this is what happens when social justice infects your policing. And right now we've got a federal government that says, oh, Toronto, it's turning into Mogadishu. You know what we're going to do? We're going to make sure that we focus our policing resources and our public safety resources on duck hunters in Alberta. A lot of these problems stem from a completely porous open border. Now, the homeless shelters in Toronto, they are housing illegal migrants that come into the country. So the homeless people who need those spaces are forced out into the TTC. So that causes a whole spate of problems because a lot of people are, and it's not popular to say, but homeless by choice because of their personal habits, but also because of mental illness, because of addiction. They are unhousable. And so they end up in the homeless shelter system, and then, as it turns out, in the TTC. The TTC in some places, it's an open air drug market, and the federal government again has said, you know what, we're sort of taking a hands-off approach with drug addiction. We don't want this to be a point of criminalization for people, but it's also a point of help when you're facing, am I going to go to jail for a drug charge, or am I going to take a diversionary program and get clean? A lot of people will choose to get clean. But if you don't have a place where police can make the contact, then that opportunity just slips away. And we also have the defund the police movement happening here. So as it turns out, despite, as I said, the lawlessness in the Toronto area with gangs, with homelessness, with drug addiction, with guns being trafficked across the border, and nobody doing anything about that because I'm the problem. There are people still out there protesting to defund the police in Toronto instead of saying, you know what, let's make sure they have the resources they need and the right direction. They're saying, no, we don't even need police at all. Okay, great. Then you guys can just social worker the daylights out of the TTC and see how that happens.
Well, Sheila, you're right, and there are some other problems as well. I mean, to address your first problem of mental illness, I know this is not a popular idea in certain circles, but as you know, in this country, beginning in the 60s, there was this whole process to deinstitutionalize people with mental health issues, some of whom were violent people. And it was on the proviso of, as long as they take their meds, well, that's a big if, because if they don't, they'll act out violently. And my argument is we need asylums again for our protection and even theirs, because you can't, I think it's terribly unfair that people with mental health issues who are prone not to taking their medications What are you going to do? Shrug every time some innocent person is brutalized? So I think we have to talk about that. We also have to talk about, because there's been a series of swarmings by preteen kids on TTC vehicles. The Criminal Youth Justice Act, a.k.a. the Young Offenders Act, that has to be rewritten, Sheila. And I'm not against, the idea of a young person who made a mistake, who did something foolish early in life, getting a second chance. And by that, I mean, if they, took a car for a joyride, if they did shoplifting, and both of those are crime. I'm not, downplaying those. But my God, first-degree murder? I'm sorry, just because you're one day under 18, that should not be a get-out-of-jail-free card. But that is where we are. It's a matter of political correctness. By the way, and you mentioned that, the social justice-y position of the police, the wokeism out there. Literally on the way to the studio today, Sheila, I was listening. I'll name them. News Talk 1010. It was the news, and I believe the story was a woman at a TTC subway platform having her purse snatched. And what they did is, the suspect is described as male, height, weight. Here's the color of clothing. What? Oh, and hair color, black. What tangible thing was missing from that suspect's description, Sheila?
Race?
Exactly. Look, if you say that there was a Honda Civic involved in a hit and run at Yonge and Eglinton, that's one thing. But if you say it was a green Honda Civic, then you've eliminated more than 95% of the Honda Civics on the road. This idea of giving a complete description except skin color, what is that? How is that considered to be an act of racism? If he's white, Asian, brown, black, I don't care. Give us a description, because right now I've got every detail I need except the most important visual indicator if I'm out and about and I happen across this guy.
Yeah. And who does this help? The only person this helps is the criminal.
Exactly.
And it is absolutely the bigotry of low expectations, by the way. That you think that everybody is just going to run out and point at every person of color, to use the language of the left, and say that's a criminal, you don't like that. What a horrible way to think about your fellow Torontonian, that you just think they're a bunch of racists in the most ethnically diverse city in the entire country, that you think that it's just teeming with racists now. Give me a break. I don't want a politician or a police chief that thinks that way about their citizens, by the way. I don't want to live in a city where the people in charge think of you as a bunch of bigots.
And the other thing too, Sheila, if the special constables, as they call the TTC's police force, and the Toronto Police Service cannot keep up with this, you know what I'd like to see revisited? Because this was pitched back in the 80s, and the then mayor of Toronto, Art Eggleton, told the man making the pitch to take a long walk off a short pier. And what I'm talking about is the Guardian Angels. In fact, I'm going to pitch you on a story right now. Maybe I should reach out for a Zoom interview with Curtis Sliwa, because I would love to see those guys riding the subway cars. Because if there's someone coming onto a subway car with trouble on their sleeve, and they're there, these guys in the red berets, I would feel more confident. I would feel more confident if family members and friends of mine were there with them. And but there is some kind of culture in Canada where this is completely unacceptable. I say this, Sheila, is part of the solution.
I don't think it's a problem with our culture. It might be a problem with our laws, though. We really don't have a right to self-defense in this country, do we? And so the people who do commit an act of self-defense, they are so often the ones charged. I bet you if you had the Guardian Angels riding the TTC, they would get arrested quicker than the drug addicts would. You know what?
Let's put it to the test, because technically you do have the right to self-defense.
Technically.
And you also, in this country too, you have the right to citizen's arrest, which is what the Guardian Angels rely on, Sheila. So I would love to know, if that idea was pitched to the current mayor, John Tory. Well, I know what his answer would be. No, everything's okay. We don't need your help. But I would love to see what Curtis has to say, because riding the subway in 2023 in Toronto is like it was riding the subway back in the late 70s, early 80s in New York City. There are some dangerous dudes there. I mean, I'm reading our friend Joe Wormington in The Sun. He's got an article today, all aboard the sleeper car, and he's showing it looks like a homeless person stretched out over 4 seats, sleeping. Presumably until the subway starts running, in which case someone has to tell him to get off. How is this beneficial to him, beneficial to society at large? Doesn't make sense to me, Sheila. So we have to start maybe going back to the past and doing things that we did then to keep the crime rate down, because all this liberalism that has infected the criminal justice system right now, the real victims, it's me and you and all the other law-abiding viewers that are watching right now, people that just want to get along with their lives, just want to make that commute.
You want to get on the train and go to work.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know what, though, David? This isn't just a Toronto problem. This is anywhere where people vote for left-wing municipal governments. Edmonton is atrocious. I don't spend a lot of time in the city. If I'm there, I just go like straight to the rugby field and then back out. Like I don't stop. If I need to go to the Costco, I'm going to the suburban Costco. I'm going to the one in Sherwood Park. I don't go anywhere near the stores or the downtown core or anything like that. There is a journalist for the Western Standard, and I've got to give a shout out to Arthur C. Green on Twitter. He's amazing. And all he does is document what it's like. Well, he does other things, of course. He's a journalist for Western Standard, and he's great. But he does a great job of documenting the human decay, I will call, that's occurring in the Edmonton transit system. And of course, as most people know, Edmonton had like a Green Party mayor for a very long time. He was more Green NDP. And then now we have Justin Trudeau's former cabinet minister, Amarjeet Sohi, in charge of the city. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And so unsafe for law-abiding Edmontonians who just want to go to work so that they can pay for Amarjeet Sohi's buddies' out-of-control inflation. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm staggered by that. Isn't there in Edmonton, I'm not familiar with their mass transit system, Sheila, but there's one particular station that is really fraught with danger. Is that correct? Or
I think they're all bad. I think they're all bad. Yeah, and they've pursued this big LRT expansion, and
yes,
it's not. I'm not sure it's quite working the way they said it would, as public transit tends to do. But it's just bad. Like the downtown LRT stations, I think, are the worst. But the ones out on the northeast of the city are bad. Like it's just all around bad. And they're spending billions and billions of dollars to create expansions to this system that it's scary to go anywhere near. Like I would not, if I were taking my kids to a hockey game, I would pay whatever they want me to pay to park downtown rather than park off site and take the LRT to the arena. There's just no way. I wouldn't do it.
Oh, I totally agree. And yet, when we look at the big picture, Sheila, Justin Trudeau and Greta Thunberg and Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum, they want us to give up our cars. They want us to ride bicycles, which must be a joy at this time of year in Edmonton. But in addition to that, take public transit because they're so against the burning of fossil fuel. And yet, the dichotomy here, Sheila, is that we're still allegedly in the grips of COVID-19. Aren't we supposed to be social distancing? So why do these world leaders want us crammed in like sardines into subway cars where social distancing is impossible at the best of times? Whereas your personal vehicle, one, you're safe, in your little aquarium on wheels, let's call it, and you're completely social distanced from other people. It seems to me these cats should be making an argument for cars, personal transportation as opposed to public transportation.
David, I'll tell you what, I'm not getting stabbed with a dirty needle by a meth head to save Mother Earth. I'm sorry. I'm just not. Sorry. I'm not getting hepatitis for Greta Thunberg. I'm not.
Is it Mother Earth, Sheila, in this day and age where we can't say mummy? Is it maybe person Earth or, chest feeder Earth? I don't know. I can't keep up. I'm like that. That character from Saturday Night Live, except not a lawyer, but a journalist, unfrozen Neanderthal journalist, your fast-moving cars and tall buildings frighten and confuse me, Sheila.
I've seen you confused by your cell phone, so I 100% believe that. Let's move on to these couple of stories about food.
Yes.
Because I think that's a good segue because we're talking about Greta Thunberg wanting me to get hepatitis to save the earth. Let's talk about food. The European Union, sneaky creeps, they've begun adding bug additives to food. So though many have suggested that consumption of bugs could be normalized if used as a food additive, some argue this could be a way for climate activists to impose their ideologies on people. So this is Project Bug Normalization, I think, is what this is. So what they do is they're sneakily adding it to food that you're already eating for absolutely no reason, by the way. They don't need to do this, but they're adding it to food so that when they say, will you have a bug patty? You say, no, that's gross. And they say, actually, we've been using it to color your yogurt or whatever all these years. So it's instead of just using like artificial color or whatever, they're using these bug additives. And I think it's to sort of set you up for normalization down the road. I want to barf. David, are you frozen?
Oh, I'm sorry, Sheila. I thought you were going to a
no.
You know what?
No,
I was frozen.
I was dry heaving. Sorry.
Was that a beetle I was looking at in a hamburger bun?
Yes.
I'm just good golly, look at that. I'm so disturbed by that. In this new world order, in which we should be eating something like that, which is just disgusting. And then I saw your piece, Sheila, about Canadian researchers saying that if you're drinking coffee, you're committing a climate crime. I'm sorry. When it comes to coffee, I cannot live without coffee. Quite literally, Sheila, if I have to get up super early, rush to an assignment, miss my coffee, around 11 a.m., a headache kicks in.
I'm crippled. I'm crippled. David, I've got to tell you, one time, because I cut things out of my diet all the time, just so that I know that I'm the boss of me, right? So I'll just be like, oh, I like that. Let's not eat it for 2 weeks, a month. Let's see. And I do that with all my habits because I want to be in charge of myself, right? And then one time I got to the big boy, coffee. And I'm like, this is the one thing. This is the one thing that I can't do. And I thought, no, I can do it. You're Sheila. You can do this. I got till about 11 a.m. and my kids are a little younger, but they were like, Mom, how do you turn on the coffee machine? We have to help you. You need your medicine. I had poured water into their cereal instead of milk. Like I was a mess, crippling headache, thought I was going to get a nosebleed. So again, I'm not putting myself through that again to save Mother Earth. And by the way, coffee is grown in some pretty far-flung places. Yep. So if you're really concerned, really concerned about your carbon footprint, try to do what I did and just give it up altogether. But in the meantime, they say, no, coffee's bad for you. So I don't know, buy a carbon offset somewhere or whatever, and go vegan on the other side to offset, the amount of coffee that you're drinking. If you truly believed your cup of joe was killing people, causing climate refugees, you'd give it up. But even they don't believe these things.
Yeah, but Sheila, you've touched upon something very important here. What if we listened to these maniacs and said, yeah, we're going to give up our coffee to save the planet, and that causes the coffee industry to collapse?
They don't care.
Well, what happens to all those workers in those countries where they're picking the coffee beans? What happens to the cafes all around the world? The mass unemployment that would follow from this, is that kind of good for the for the climate too? Is that a price you want to pay? Do these people think this through even?
Well, there's a reason why they are not calling for a complete boycott of the coffee industry. Because, as you know, they've called for a boycott of the meat industry for the same reason, and a boycott of the fossil fuel industry for the exact same reason. And I joke in my piece, like if they actually shuttered the coffee industry, then who would buy all the Greta Thunberg and Ruth Bader Ginsburg t-shirts when all the environmentalist baristas are unemployed? Because this is them, right? Like all the environmentalists work at Starbucks is my joke. So if they cannot unemploy themselves. So that's why they're saying, just offset your carbon footprint over in this place instead of canceling it altogether. But yeah, I mean, what about a just transition? Coffee shop environmentalists. That's what you want for my husband. Why don't you try it?
Yeah, there's so many unsung pleasures in life. Coffee's one of them. I've always said, Sheila, if somebody put a gun to my head and said, you must choose a religion to be a devout follower of right now, start researching. Well, right away, based on culinary choices, I eliminate some of the religions. Judaism and Islam, no bacon. Sorry, that's a
no
non-starter. I can't go without bacon. No insult to followers of those faiths. Mormonism, you can't have coffee or tea. You can't have anything with a stimulant, I believe. Sorry, as much as you have a beautiful choir, I need my morning coffee. So, I'm starting to run out of choices here. But anyways, I better switch subjects before I really get into trouble. Sheila, you said there was something else about food that you wanted to talk about?
Oh, that was the one. That was the one about coffee being a climate crime, which is the dumbest thing. But yeah, they won't cancel their own industry, coffee shop barista environmentalists, but they'll, put all the people in the fossil fuel industry out of work. By the way, the really dumb thing in that article was that these researchers said it's actually less greenhouse gas emissions if you use a coffee pod than if you brew a pot of coffee. Because that's what they said. Because they said that it takes a lot of greenhouse gas emissions to warm an entire pot of coffee that you brew in one shot, and then I guess you drink it throughout the day as it slowly turns to mud. And so for them, they're worried about greenhouse gas emissions and actually not real garbage, because they said, the coffee pod, you only brew what you need and then that's it. But then you also, cut down a tree to make the label on the coffee pod and ship these individually packaged things to you. They didn't really worry about those things because they're not actually worried about real garbage, tossing that thing in the landfill. Actually, I burn them, but whatever. But they didn't actually consider that because, again, that's actually real garbage, and they're only worried about fake pollution of carbon dioxide.
And you know what, Sheila, there's no way to prove this one way or the other, I suppose, unless we got some honest answers from the researchers themselves. But when they were doing this coffee being a climate crime problem, I swear, what do you want to bet? As they were working on their research papers, they had a cup of Joe. I just know it. I know it in my heart and soul. They were drinking coffee as they wrote this anti-coffee piece.
Oh, for sure they were. And this is just like more of this like war on normal food. I don't know why they're doing it. Well, I do know why they're doing it, but it gets worse and worse all the time. So it was meat, and everyone's like, meat, save the planet. Let's get rid of that. And now they're talking about coffee. I saw at a school in Scotland, by the way, all the really bad ideas these days seem to be coming from Scotland. A school.
What a shame. I'm of Scottish heritage.
Me too.
A couple of years ago, I got a great book, How the Scots Invented the Modern World. Talking about all the inventions the Scots are responsible for. And you're right. We've gone into bizarro Superman territory when it comes to Scotland right now. I think I know where you're going with this, so fire away, Sheila.
It's the meat. Have you seen this? They've taken the meat out of schools over there. I know. And you want to talk about the transgender men
That's
in
where I
prisons.
thought you were going with this.
Yeah, no, this is what I'm saying. All the bad ideas are coming from Scotland. They have more. Scotland has the most transgender men in their female prisons in the entire United Kingdom, more than Wales and England. And the latest 2 additions, one's a convicted pedophile, and the other one is a 2-time rapist anyway, who clearly has all of his anatomy intact because he's wearing leggings in a picture that I made everybody on the live stream look at yesterday. And
But Sheila, a very, very important point. And it's right in the headline of the Daily Mail that more than 50% of these inmates only began transitioning once they were in the jail, you know?
Yeah, of course.
And
the taxpayer gets to pay for you to have an easy ride in a women's prison and access to more victims? Of course they are.
Yeah. Let's incarcerate the fox in the hen house. And nobody with these woke prison systems and the criminal justice system there, nobody's thinking, you know what? Maybe
this
just
is the picture
maybe.
I was talking about.
Pardon me?
This is the picture I was talking about.
Holy mackerel. Whoa.
Yeah.
Man,
anyway.
They say, you know, Sheila, they say a picture says 1,000 words. I think this one's saying 999 words too many, if you know what I'm saying.
I don't know how that's a court outfit, by the way. Like, dress appropriately for court. I don't care if you're male or female.
Sheila, would you ever wear something like that?
No, not even to the gym. Like, no, but especially not to court, unless you want to prove to everybody when you wear something like that to court as a male to female transgender advocating to be sent to a women's prison. When you wear something like that, that is a statement of mockery.
Yep.
To the victim, the victims, I'm sorry, but also to society writ large. That's what you're doing there.
Well, in that case, Sheila, if it's all about mockery, then whenever this individual gets out of the big house, there was a teaching job waiting for him at the Halton District School Board. They love teachers who come to class mocking the other sex. So there you go. There's your new shop teacher, Oakville Trafalgar High School.
Yeah.
You might want to wear a codpiece around those spinning saws. Oh, jeez.
I don't know what to, I just can't even believe this is like the world in which we live. There's every day that Jesus isn't like Control Alt Smite. Every day that doesn't happen to us, I think we're living on borrowed time. The other thing about Scotland is, I started off writing it, but then I was like, this is a video. I have a video in me about this. How they are, because of climate change, throw another child on the altar because they are taking all the meat out of schools in an effort to become completely vegan in the school system. There is no greater time that a child needs access to B12 than in the early developmental years. And so if kids are, and especially like in school nutrition programs, so those are geared towards kids who don't have the best home life, or maybe they live in, like a lower socioeconomic class. These are working class kids, so they don't have the best diets at home. And so they come to school, and instead of getting B12 from meats and animal products and eggs, they are getting gut busting amounts of insoluble fiber and I guess fructose. And then they're going to wonder why these little kids are like all day long, just moods and behavior right off the rails. And it's because you're feeding them full of fructose all day long. And they're just going to go up and down instead of just sort of be even keeled and have their brains appropriately fueled with the things that they need. The developing world, the nutritional supplement in the developing world these days is eggs. 2 eggs a week. The studies have said, and they've studied them over the course of years so that they could see what it does to kids who are receiving them and kids who aren't receiving them. 2 eggs, because of the fat, protein, and B12 content in them, is enough to prevent stunting. It catches them up in their cognitive delays caused by malnutrition. And so when you are taking kids now, and it's a problem in the developing world, a real problem. The kids are malnourished. Why on earth would a first world country like Britain say, those nutrient deficient kids in the developing world, let's do that to them here. Let's make them nutrient deficient. What you're going to see is the scores just plummet in these schools where kids are already struggling because they're on a food program. So these are not like Tony Rich kids. These are kids on a food program. So they're already behind in the game. It's just going to get worse for them because you're not feeding them properly.
But Sheila, I just, because we are talking about Scotland, and it's been a few decades, unfortunately, since I've been last back to Scotland. Of all the nations in the world, I mean, when you look at the Scots, common sense people, down to earth people, the common man driving the common van, they would mock this kind of wokeism, and yet somehow this nation is now infected by. I mean, what happened? To use the Fred Willard term.
You know what and I generally think probably the people there are still kind of working class, down to earth people, just like I think most of the people in Edmonton are. But these people get into municipal politics, and they know that's where you can make the quickest change fastest.
Yep. You know what?
That's what happens. Look at these multi-billion-dollar climate change policies. They're not coming from the feds. They're coming from Edmonton, Calgary, Ottawa, and it's the city councils. The good news is for the common man driving the common van, whose dog ain't got a pedigree, I think as the song goes. They because they're closer to you, they're municipal politicians, you can get to them a little bit easier. Like, you can talk to them, you can go see them, because they are not flying back and forth from Ottawa or going to Toronto or going to the capital city. They're right there. You can go see them in their office, and you should try and communicate with them just how outrageous you find their policies.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if I went back there and just went to, a pub or a diner and spoke to the common folk, they would be as appalled as we are about vegan diets for children and transgendered male prisoners going to female prisons. I think you're right. It's the woke elites that think they know the best that are getting positions at city council, becoming the mayor, becoming the school board director of education. That's where the rot is.
Yeah. And it's happening there, and it's happening fast because they know it's easy to get elected into these positions because the rest of us aren't paying attention.
Yep.
We're always focused on Trudeau. We're focused on, the resurgence of Rachel Notley, and we're not looking at our school board. We worry about the things our kids bring home from school and what they're being taught in school. Why aren't we why aren't we holding the people who are making these decisions accountable? Because we can.
And you're right, Sheila. I mean, I'm always shocked. Like, municipal elections have a very low turnout to begin with, and it's always baffled me because the people responsible for garbage pickup, fixing the potholes, getting you clean drinking water, it's all the municipal level. It affects you the most directly. But amongst municipal candidates, the absolute lowest voter turnout is for school board trustee.
Yeah.
Most people don't even bother marking a box. And these are the people that are responsible for your child's education. And really, increasingly, to your point, Sheila, the school board trustee position is like the stepping stone for leftists to go on to bigger political ambitions. This is like the bush leagues, the minor leagues for them. In terms of going
training camp.
Exactly. So you got to keep an eye on this. You got to ask them basic questions. But Sheila, I believe we might have some super chats.
I love how I shocked you that I knew John Conley. All right. He was one of my dad's favorite artists. Okay. Maminka gives us $10. Trudeau has to go along with the Schwab trained people who penetrate the cabinet. I guess you're not voting for Trudeau?
And the question arises, Sheila, if you had to bet on it, and it's one of three choices, this year, next year, or 2025, when is the next time we are going to go to the polls for a federal election?
I don't think it's going to be this year. I don't know about the next two, but I don't think it's going to be this year. And that's a game that Trudeau is going to have to play. I think he's sort of waiting for everybody to grow to hate Pierre Poilievre, I think.
Yep.
And the media to really paint him in a certain light. But the longer he waits, the more Canadians grow to hate Justin Trudeau, because it sounds like we're in for a world of hurt this year financially, with just skyrocketing inflation and a contraction of the economy, except maybe out here in Alberta where things are booming. But I don't know. I just don't think it's going to be this year.
And of course, the wild card is Jagmeet Singh ever going to grow a set? And instead of condemning Prime Minister Trudeau in public and then propping him up in the House of Commons, how long can he play that act, Sheila? Because I would argue right now that the NDP is not even a credible party anymore.
No, it's really weird, actually, because you see them vote like in lockstep with the Liberals on everything. And then Jagmeet Singh will go and do a TikTok about how he doesn't like the Liberals. And I'm like, but your voting record doesn't reflect that at all. So I don't know. It's one of those things where people could say a lot of things, but you got to watch what they do. And I don't know how long NDP voters are going to put up with this. Yeah. Because I'm pretty sure they didn't vote for Justin Trudeau, right? Like, I think if you made a conscious decision to vote for the NDP, I don't understand it. I don't understand why you would make that choice. But if you did, I think that it's because you feel more ideologically aligned with the NDP than with the Liberals.
Yep.
Okay. So when are you going to hold your guy accountable for just being an ideological Liberal with his voting record?
And I would argue too, Sheila, that the NDP right now has an identity crisis. I mean, It's a two-headed dragon. You have the Jagmeet Singh, Armani wearing suit, BMW M3 driving, Starbucks sipping, Starbucks latte sipping NDPer. And then you had the classic NDP, and these were the hard hat brigade, the lunch bucket brigade, the guys out there in the field laying pipes, blue collar. They're not the Toronto Starbucks crowd. But the NDP, I think, has to decide which camp are they going to appeal to, because it's a diametrically opposed position, those two groups.
Oh, I think the NDP have long since abandoned their so-called blue-collar roots. I think those blue-collar workers, despite the fact that they have forced union dues that go to a union that will support the NDP, I think a lot of them probably will. And I know this is how it is in Alberta. Like the blue-collar unions, they're all conservative because you don't get into the trades to vote for champagne socialists and academics to tell you that the way you talk in the lunchroom is offensive to them. So I think the NDP, that ship has sailed. They have long abandoned the normals that for some reason voted NDP for like academics, wokesters, baristas, and the educrat class.
I love that term, educrats. They hate it, but I love it.
That's what they are. Okay, we've got one more. It's $20. Holy cow. Thank you so much. $20. Court Mocker. He said he tried to donate to Jeremy Mackenzie's Give Send Go. I think that's the one started by our friend Viva. Neither Capital One card or Interior Savings card worked, called Capital One. And they said they don't support that campaign and won't process my gift. So even if you get out around, and I guess I'll give it a little backstory, just Cole's Notes version. So Jeremy Mackenzie, controversial veteran, he's got charges in multiple provinces, but convicted of none of them. And that's a really important point to make. He said some, I would say, less than palatable things about Pierre Poilievre's wife. Okay. That's not illegal. I think the police even investigated him for it. But he's been debanked by Scotiabank. And I know that convicted terrorists like Omar Khadr, they can have a bank account in Canada. I know because I pulled Omar Khadr's banking record or his property records, and I know he held a mortgage on a house. I know Carla Homolka had a little small business. She killed 3 girls in Ontario and maybe even more, and her husband was the Scarborough rapist. People only started dying when she came along. So do with that what you will. There are businesses in the GTA that are credibly accused of laundering money for the world's largest state sponsor of terror, Iran. They have bank accounts. So Jeremy Mackenzie, even though he's facing charges and has said some controversial things, and like him or not, he should be allowed to bank like every other person in this entire country. And that's it. That's it. If Carla Homolka can have a bank account, so can Jeremy Mackenzie. Jeremy Mackenzie's crime is not the things he's accused of. The crime is that he is a vocal opponent of Justin Trudeau, and these banks know that who the boss is. And that's why they were none of them objected to freezing bank accounts of people under the Emergencies Act. Not a single one of them said, no, that's a terrible idea. So now they know what to do. And so our friend Viva started a Give, Send, Go. I think it was a Give, Send, Go for Jeremy, because he cannot deposit or get access to his veterans pension. Because whatever you think about this guy, he served our country for 13 or 14 years. He's got a pension. He should be able to get it. He earned it. He served our country. Whether you like him or not, he served our country. But he can't get it because he doesn't have a bank account. And he can't bank anywhere, from what I understand now. He can't bank anywhere, not a credit union, not anything. He is basically like drug dealers can get bank accounts, right? He can't get a bank account. He can't operate at a credit union. So Viva tried to start a Give, Send, Go so that if this ever gets sorted out or not, at least he can have a little money to live. And Give, Send, Go will take the money, but the banks are doing something gross here because they won't let you donate your own money, or your credit card company, I guess it is. They won't let you donate your own hard-earned money to this Give, Send, Go. Because Jeremy's been completely unpersoned. It's hideous.
And by the way, folks, if you haven't seen Sheila Gunn Reid's commentary on this, I think it's one of her best commentaries of all time. Please give it a view. And I just want to say to anyone out there that is giving heat to my friend, who is interpreting that commentary, which in my eyes and most reasonable people's eyes is more than fair to Jeremy Mackenzie. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Sheila just encapsulated what she said in the commentary. It's not right, despite some of the things that this person has said and done. It's not right that he becomes a D person, an unperson in the banking system, whereas a terrorist like Omar Khadr, a serial killer like Karla Homolka, they have bank accounts. I don't know what it is that you saw in Sheila's commentary that makes you upset or thought it was unfair, because it was a brilliant piece. And please revisit it and get your head screwed back on properly, because you would never see this kind of fairness given to Mr. Mackenzie in the mainstream media. In fact, I'm sure they're applauding what the banks are doing to him. And that's what I have to say about that, Sheila.
You know, I cheer for people to get back on your feet. Yep. I don't want anybody doing poorly, generally speaking. And Jeremy's fighting with the government. Like, they held him without bail for, I think it was 2 months. 2 months. That's crazy. Those kids who are accused of swarming and murdering a man in Ontario, they were out very fast. Because if you are a critic of Justin Trudeau, it doesn't matter what you've done. They're going to throw the book at you. And that's what we've seen with Jeremy. That's what we've seen with Tamara. It doesn't matter the crime you stand accused of in this country. You're supposed to be able, unless there are some very extenuating circumstances, qualify for bail. And we've seen people who are critics of Justin Trudeau not qualify for bail, and swarm accused murderers get out like that. It's unbelievable. And again, I don't want to live in a country where your politics dictate your treatment by the legal system. I don't want to live in that country. So whether or not you like Jeremy, whether you don't, whether you like me, I don't care. I don't take any of these things personally. But do you want to live in a country where your politics change the way you're treated in the legal system? And if you're a liberal cheering for this kind of stuff, would you be happy if Prime Minister Pierre Poilievre kept you behind bars for mischief for months because you held a sign on his doorstep one day? Or would you think, okay, well, I shouldn't be protesting at his house, but I should be able to get out today? Because careful what you wish for, because the tyranny that you are cheering for today will become entrenched tomorrow and used against you.
100%, Sheila. And folks, Sheila's not exaggerating. You know, part of your commentary, Sheila, was that interview I did with the individual out west. And he complained about the rainbow icon on his Scotiabank app because it was long after Pride Month had come and gone. Guess what, folks? He was given 30 days to remove his accounts, or they would be put into a check and sent to him just because he complained about the Pride logo being used after Pride Month. So where is the line? Is there a line? This is a cautionary tale, I think, Sheila, because I only see this getting worse, this problem.
It is soft fascism. And I hate to use that word flippantly, and I'm not. I've read more Mussolini than I wanted to in my entire life for the past week because I've been giving a lot of thought to where we are as a society. And, his mantra, because he's sort of the guy who invented fascism as we know it, right? The modern fascist party. And it's everything under the state, nothing outside of the state. And now that could be done by force, but it can also be done through intimidation, having the beatings continue until morale improves, and the banks just knowing. They just know now. You do what the government wants you to do, and you'll be good, loyal little soldiers for the liberals. And that's what they're doing now. And for the public, they just self-censor. Look, right now, you would expect in normal times convoys to celebrate the annual return of the convoy, to celebrate the anniversary. But you know why it's not going to happen as large as I would expect it to?
The banks.
People are scared of the banks, because the banks are going to do what Justin Trudeau wants them to do. They're scared of their bank accounts being seized, because nothing outside the state.
Shocking. Well, Sheila, do we have any more chats, my friend?
I think that's it. That's it. I'm going to check my bank, make sure it's not frozen.
Well, thank you so much for tuning into the Daily Roundup. We really appreciate it. And a special thank you to those who contributed money. Thank you to my co-host and, of course, super producer Olivia. I believe Sheila and I were going to be back in this space at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. And in the meantime, folks, as always, stay safe and stay sane.
This is Callum Smiles, Rebel News, outside of the Edinburgh Sheriff Court to cover the ongoing case of Paddy Hogg. Now, Paddy Hogg, back in 2020, attended an anti-lockdown protest in Edinburgh and was arrested after being accused of being one of the organisers. Paddy Hogg back then was an elected local councillor for Cumbernauld East, and now Rebel have been funding and fighting his legal battle every step of the way. So I've come here to Edinburgh to get an update on the case and see how he's doing. After spending the morning in the Edinburgh Sheriff Court, and because of the such strict contempt of court laws here in Scotland, there's not too much we can say about the ongoing case. But what we can confirm is that a trial has been set for later in the year. Paddy, just how do you feel about the case? Are you optimistic?
I'm very optimistic. I think the evidence is going to show there was no justification for what's been done. I think we're going to prove the case and common sense will prevail.
And how do you feel about those who follow Rebel News, who feel so strongly about your defence that have actually helped fund all the legal fees?
Can I just say a huge thank you to everyone who has done so. I couldn't have ever defended myself financially, given the expense in court in Scotland. So a huge thanks again for everything you've done. Really appreciate it.
Well, Paddy, thank you very much for your time, and we wish